Why
this, but
the hell not?
generally, it's a good idea. See how that little eyeball just appeared in the top corner there?
Okay.
Okay, when that appears, start talking. But if you're talking before the eyeball appears, it doesn't pick it up on the recording.
It doesn't pick it up. So usually that introduction, hi, everybody, by the way, welcome. High and empowered. We're on early. So if you expected us today at 12, no. We're impatient. We are excited. We are enthralled, enthused. I have a lot of excitement for the day. Look, this morning, the sunrise was breathtaking. Colors that I could not even recreate. And doing a video this morning, I did a quick video this morning while I was walking and I saw the colors of the sky. It didn't look the same. It didn't translate the same in the video as what I was looking at. And I'm like, there's nothing like living in the now, living in that moment, living in that second where you suck it all in. So today, I want to jump right into this, because I can talk forever. We have Ray. We have Ray from Dualistic Unity. We are going to be asking serious questions, serious answers, big decisions, big answers. Really, that's part of the show today. Because that's where my mindset was started. Because we're going to talk big decisions. Big things happen from big decisions. And big happenings. But today, we're really discussing more sudden life-altering moments. How they restructure one's life. How they could push us to that new, wavelength of thinking, into that new perspective of being. Is it that pushes us? And this stems from a conversation last week with our guest last week, and kind of what pushed her into this. What happened that was so life-altering, that made you come out to your parents and made you, change your direction in life and go from corporate law to, and this is our guest last week, but, go into this more artistic realm of self-expression and openness with everybody. So a whole new authenticity. Wild. So today we have Ray. And we're not going to go easy. Ray, say hey, Ray.
Hey, glad to be here. I'll admit that I'm super baked, and I'm glad to be here and chatting with you. But it's interesting, something that you were saying there about big choices. My life has changed in such a profound way in the last half of my life, and I'm going to be 45 there in a couple months, and so it's not like I've not been around for a while. But there was a period of my life that was very different than what it is now. Like if I were to see people from my teenage years, and I know because I have now, they don't recognize me. And I don't mean just physically, but they don't actually recognize me as a person. I remember I sat down with an old friend from high school about 10 years ago. And I was about, a good 12, 13 years along the journey that I'm on now. And we met and had dinner over casino buffet. I remember he was like, let's get together. We'll sit down, shoot the shit. And so we started shooting shit. And within about 20 minutes, he's like, you are Ray, right? Like you did go to such and such high school. Like you are the same guy. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you do not seem like the same guy. And it's just because all of a sudden I was free, like in a number of ways. But it wasn't through large changes so much as the large changes were started by small changes, like little decisions here and there between taking the path that everybody assumes is the secure path, doing what you should do versus doing what you feel is a reflection of you and the changes that you're going through. Just one decision after another, right? Like it wasn't just me deciding to go off into the rainforest for 8 months to get away from everything and discover myself that really shifted my life. That was the result of little shifts along the way that eventually just drove me mad in the city that I was living in, because I was looking at all of my needs. I was looking at all of my tendencies towards control, manipulation, towards trying to validate myself. And then I was seeing it everywhere in everyone. And so all of a sudden, all of these little changes, all these little shifts in perspective came to a head. And I was forced to make a choice between changing in the way that I knew I was changing or following the path that everybody else dictated as the right path to follow. And so here I am, 20 some odd years into this now, I'm a single dad, recently out of a relationship that lasted a couple of decades. Right. I'm starting, Dualistic Unity. Right. We've been at it for over 2.5 years now. And it's caution to the wind with that, because every decision we make in Dualistic Unity is to go for the impression of the message, the authenticity that it comes from, how genuine it is, as opposed to whether or not it's going to make us a profit or yield us a bigger audience. And so every little decision between authenticity and being myself versus being the person that I think should be according to what society dictates has led to massive changes, has led to moments where it was just all the little changes suddenly shift, and you're left with a choice to continue being yourself and let fucking the chips fall or not. And so
Did those
that's where I
little
am now.
choices, those little decisions, did those affect your personal life? I mean, did that bring your
Of
personal? I mean,
course.
when I say that, because when you say it's all those little things that drove me to the jungle, all those little things, it wasn't one. You you like that? Look, it didn't drive me crazy. No, it drove me to the jungle, swinging with a loincloth from tree to tree, screaming my new animal call. That's what it is, though. You are shedding the skin of who you were when the people in school couldn't recognize you, and they sit down next to you and they look at your face and they go, okay, I know who you are, but are you Ray? I mean, what happened to Ray inside? So through the evolution of us in life, the older we get, and you're getting older, I'm getting older. I don't like to talk about how old I am. It, but in that, we do get wiser, but not all of us. So if I sat down with half the people I went to high school with, they're going to look at me and be like, who are you? What happened to Oren? I mean, Oren was like Spicoli kicking open the van doors, and he's like, hey, I mean, yes, that's who, but I wasn't him. I was a creative artist. I was an explorer, but nobody knew that. Nobody saw that. I did that after high school, after college. Those people would never recognize who I am now. They would hear the words coming out of my mouth, and again, they'd question, am I talking to the right guy? What happened to him? Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So for you, it was all these small things that hit you. Now, what are these small things that are hitting you? Because I mean, I say that, let's identify some of the things that bring us to that point of life changing. I say that because look, it can happen immediately. For me, it happened immediately. If I go back 11, 12, 13 years ago, office job, great position as an international freight forwarder, but was it? I worked for my dad. It was it was cushy. It's cushy when you work for, even though you put up with a different type of insult, you put up with a different type of ridicule, you're never really appreciated. You are, but you're not, because, your family. It's nepotism. You didn't really earn it. And I didn't. I didn't earn any of the shit I had. And then mom died. And I saw life for the first time ever. And it was in those last conversations with her, in that clarity, that she saw and I still couldn't see. And she told me about trips we're going to take and how life would never be the same because we have to live it differently. We have to see it differently. So for me, it was a sudden change. For you, you said it was a bunch of little things. So one of those little things that we can identify are catalysts of change, catalysts of seeing, because you're right, even good and bad leads to that catalyst of change. I wish it was more good.
This is a really good question, and because you ask it, of course, so credit to you. But it's interesting because while I'm saying that it's a bunch of little changes, that wasn't necessarily the case for the early part of my life. Like, so the example that you just gave of basically having the rug ripped out from under you and having to reassess everything. All of a sudden, there's a huge shift in your life and you have to reassess everything from the ground floor. That happened to me pretty much for the entire first 2 decades of my life. Like I've not had a family in the traditional sense. I spent most of my life being moved around. I've always been isolated. I've always been alone. I've never had that support structure. I've never had a home. I've never had a history that was rooted. Like everybody's got that hometown, those hometown friends they grew up with. I don't have that. right? I never had that. I don't have parents in the traditional sense. I have nobody. Okay. And I didn't for the first 2 decades of my life. So just over and over again, I tried to reach for something. I tried to attach to something. I tried to be something. I tried to invest in something as a strategy. I tried to, connect with people in a way that I thought was meaningful, all that stuff. And it all just fucking turned to ash. All of it. And so eventually, what came from that after being suicidal for many years was the recognition of what was happening, which wasn't the fact that the change was fucking me up, but my resistance to it. It was my need. It was my need that was fucking me up. And so the little changes that happened after that were me recognizing that need before they led me to a fucking conflict, before the rug could be pulled out from underneath me. I recognized I didn't need to invest in that fucking rug or even stand on it. Right. And that was the little choices, one at a time. Oh shit, this is coming from need to feel certain, need to feel secure, need to feel valid, need to feel fucking, valuable, need to feel like I know what's going to happen next, need to know what it means about me. And those are the choices.
But you said something right there that is so important. I need to know what's happening next. And in the destruction of one's mind, body goes, mentality goes, your reasoning goes. And I say that because you want to know what's happening next. Look, I can relate to so many different things in so many different ways. Life has not been overly, it has and it hasn't. Where it's given, it's taken. And sometimes it's taken so much and so much more and continues to take. And you question, is this, is this what I'm supposed to be going through? It is, you're right. But then you start weighing and judging yourself. And again, it comes back all to knowing what's happening next. You want to be in control of, and I do. Now, I tell people you are in control of your day. You're in control of your week, your month, your year, your life. You create all of it. But in that, are we forcing our creation of it so much? Are we forcing that fact? Are we forcing the control of something within the creation of it? Instead of letting it happen, letting it be, letting it.
And how do you know? Right? And how do you know? Because we're biased. This is why I said, to me, the first and biggest thing was the need, was recognizing I was needy, recognizing I was looking for that control, recognizing that, everything that I wanted was a cessation of my suffering and fear. Right? I just wanted to know. I wanted to be less uncertain. Right? And that was pretty much it. And now I don't want to know. I don't want to know. And the reason I don't want to know is because nothing I could have ever projected into the future would have been this. Ever. Right? And this is far better than anything I could have fabricated. As a young man trying to dream of an ideal life, it wouldn't have been this. I would not have imagined this would have been as fulfilling as it is. I would have been thinking about fucking parties.
What? Elaborate. No, elaborate. Tell me. I want to know what you wanted to be.
But this is it. Like, I didn't know. I just wanted everybody to look at me in a certain way, and I wanted to have a certain amount of comfort, and I didn't want to have any more suffering, and I didn't want to have any more uncertainty. And it was all of that stuff. And because of that, because there was this fixation on it, because that's all I had experienced was the opposite. Because of my fixation on it, oddly enough, is that the fixation on that one side creates the lack that then drives you to want that other side even more. And that was the point, is to eventually recognize, like, fuck, I can't even see what I'm doing because I'm needy. So I need to look at the need. I have to look at where I'm needy and be honest about it. And that's self-honesty. And that self-honesty is something that you can't pass on to others. You can't teach others. You can't force them to do it. They can't do it because they should do it. Right? It's something that has to come with those early morning hours where you're looking at yourself and going, I'm judging myself. I'm trying to be something else. I'm trying to be what I think other people want me to be. And actually just recognizing, like, all of that's needless. It doesn't actually make you any more than what you are. Right? It just takes away from your life and your ability to express yourself, as you were saying you like to do earlier.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's one of my personalities that like to express himself. Look, is it you coping, or any of us? Not just you. I'm not saying Ray. Is it you? That's no. What I say is it you. I see a lot of what you say is what we want to say or need to say, but we don't know how to say it. You word it very well. You have a very eloquent way of putting things together, and
After 20
that's
years
where
of
more
dumpster
people.
fires, sure. Right, like you're hearing me now after again it's kind of like, and I know we've talked about this story about this rich guy goes and he hires this renowned painter, and he says, I want you to paint me a portrait, and the painter says, sure, no problem. And they sit down for an afternoon. The painter looks at him and says, all right, stand right there, and he fucking does his thing. Boom, 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 boom. 2 hours later, the fucking painting is drying, and the rich guy's like, oh my god, that's amazing, how much do I owe you? And he's like, $20,000. He's like, but it took you 2 hours. He's like, no, it took me my whole life. Right? And that's very much what you're hearing. Is I've just thrown a lot of fucking paint at the wall. A lot.
Well, I mean, no, and that's so in that, when we are feeling needy, when we are feeling that we have to push and make that drive, to succeed, to be, is that maybe our way of coping with a loss? The loss of, like, look, you were in a relationship for many years. And were you married?
Sort of.
Like a common, okay. But you separate.
I have particular views on marriage. To me, marriage is always something of today.
Look, I was an anti-marriage person, and I was just about the union of life, because you don't need a piece of paper to tell two people that they are together in a unified way. You just see it, you feel it. It's a vibe, it's an energy, it's fantastic when it's working. And then shit shifts, things happen, things change. So I understand.
Okay, no, that's a good question. Okay, so this goes kind of back to the next thing. Okay, a big part of need is preference. We may not like it, but preferences are also kind of part of the trap that we paint ourselves into, right? Like, I would prefer that the relationship that I was in didn't go in the direction that it did, right? Well, why? Well, because this sucks, like there's a bunch of stuff to deal with in doing this. But the question is, why does it suck? Outside of my resistance to it, outside of me thinking it shouldn't be happening, that, what I think should be happening is better, outside of any of this need to assume I fucking know again, or that I should have control, what's the issue with the way things have gone? What's the issue? Outside of my preferences, outside of my assumptions and my needs, what is the issue? There is none. And when I actually get out of the way and recognize what's happening, I recognize that relationships should change according to the individuals within it. This idea that they should always be together, that idea is based on the idea of a relationship. But a relationship's not a concept. It's something that happens when two people come together. It's not like all of a sudden you've walked into a room called relationship, right? We forget that it's not actually a thing. It's a reflection of who we are. And if we're changing, then maybe they shouldn't last that whole time. But that's different than my need to think they should, and what it means about me.
Just to be funny, you sound single. And
Delightfully.
You sound like a single. I mean, no, but in that, look, I'm going through a multitude. Look, so you said it's a whole lifetime that you dealt with all these small changes, all these small happenings, all these I'll call them BBs of life, just pop, popping along the way over 20 years. I have experienced most of these changes over the last, we'll say 10 years of pain, of suffering, of immediate torment and degradation of oneself and change. My God, sir, change. And then the internet came by, and there's frigging, we changed the way we approached people. Look, I was a DJ, and I was popular where I was, and I thought that was the epitaph, the thing. I've reached the ceiling of where I'm going, and then the internet came around, and it's like, no, I have new ceilings I can go to. And then I realized none of it matters. Holy shit. And so in those changes, you went through them so many, so long. And I went through many of the same, very close, where I lost parents. You didn't have parents. And, you know, it's wild. So how do you cope? What is your coping? I mean,
Okay, so
how do
that's a
you
great question. I like this because I don't like the idea of coping, because that just assumes that all I'm going to do is continue to go through the same problem, right? Like if I'm coping with it, it's something I'm saddled with. But what I'm dealing with isn't actually what's happening. It's my resistance to it. It's my judgment of it. That's what I'm trying to cope with. But if I'm trying to cope with my own resistance, why not just get rid of the resistance? Why not just look at why I have that resistance? Because then I'm not coping. I'm fucking dealing. I'm accepting it. Like everything that's happening right now with my ex, for example, none of it's pleasant. I have a teenage daughter that's going through the middle of this, right? So regardless of how well we might manage to work together in a co-parenting way, regardless of any of the things that might appear on the surface, there is still shit that we're going through. And when I sit at home at night by myself when my daughter's gone to her mom's place, it's not like all of a sudden those thoughts of my life don't come up and I start going like, oh, the marriage could have went this way. And, I wish my daughter could have experienced this and so on and so forth. It's not like that's not there. And immediately the emotional rush that goes with that of I fucked up, right? But all of that is coming back to this idea of me and a right path for me and everyone else. And if only I had control, we'd all be doing better. Like all of a sudden, it wipes out all of their own choices to fucking deal with their life in one way or another. Right? I don't have control. My ideal isn't the ideal. It just feels that way because I want something to look to so I can judge myself and have justification to do so. But the ideal is fictitious. It exists only by virtue of my desire to judge myself. That's it.
is that in the restructuring of you? So in the restructuring of Ray, because I'm on a journey and I'm very open. I want people to know I am on a journey of finding my authenticity, finding I know my purpose, but it redefines itself in so many strange ways all the time because the purpose is the same, but on my comfort of life, my lack of stress and thought towards having to find my support to be able to bring support. So, anyways, I'm on a journey. In yours, how has
Now,
that?
I want to go back to that for a second. Hold up. Straight up. I want to go. I want to ask you a question because this was the loop I found myself in forever. And I was saying this to you earlier. The first half of my life, as that rug kept getting pulled out from under me, I kept looking for what you're talking about. That authentic self, that purpose, that idea of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I was trying to find that new me. I was trying to restructure Ray. And I did so in so many ways that eventually there was nothing left for me except death. Okay? Because the investment in that Ray, in that idea, is the hell I'm going through. So there is no restructuring of Ray. There is a dissolution of Ray. I treat the fiction of Ray like a whisper. It's so unimportant. Like the idea of me has nothing to do with who I am whatsoever. But it is certainly what overlays my life. When I hold on to the idea of me, all of a sudden it's like I'm wearing a VR helmet that superimposes my reality. All of a sudden I'm experiencing nothing but my own thoughts and judgment rather than the moment I'm in. Right? And that all comes from the fiction of Ray because I have nothing else to defend. All of my thoughts about judgment, all of my thoughts of where I should go, all of my thoughts about whether I have value or not is all revolving around this fictional Ray. All of it. But I am not that fictional Ray. I was never actually Ray. We're not born with a name. See, that's the funniest part. Like, we're not actually born with any kind of label whatsoever. We take that shit on. You're not actually your name. There is no stagnant thing called Oren, right? Oren has been a different thing every moment of your life. But it's just like in math, how we have a variable name, X equals this, right? We get so lost in the variable name that we forget the value is always changing. We're like, I'm X, and X equals a big fucking question
But for those who are able to see it, look, so many don't see it. Right there, what you're talking about, you're right. There is so much more than just that name. There's so much more. But the main populace never see the you.
That's unimportant to me.
You. You don't see it.
But that's
Most of your
unimportant.
life, you never see.
Do I
So
see?
that's in that. That's so those, but people don't choose to grow from those BBs of life, those moments, emotional torture that life becomes. They don't choose to grow from that or choose to see beyond where they are, who they
Does
are.
that mean they're not changing?
Oh, oh, maybe. I don't know because
Change is
I've met.
constant.
Look, I've seen the evolution of some people, having gone through some of the craziest parts of life, and they've never changed.
Oh, no,
Ideology,
no, you don't see that change because you're looking at your idea of them in the same way that they're looking at their idea of Oren.
but my idea of them is so small, so limited, so fleeting. I have no idea of them. I have no.
Apparently you do. You're assuming they're
Well,
not changing.
it's within my thought of that. I
So
say that because it's I almost feel like it's a generational thing.
you say that because you are on a trajectory that you assume everybody else should be on.
I mean, no, not purposely. I mean, what am I
No, but because it
subconsciously
feels so
projecting?
good to you, because it feels so good to you to be more yourself, you make the assumption that everybody else should be more themselves, right? But if it wasn't for half the assholes you've met in your life, you wouldn't be inspired not to be one.
But then fight not to be one.
No, just to
Look,
recognize that you could be one and choose not to be.
oh no! I'm not saying I'm not. It's like where you're saying I'm not positive. I'm enthusiastic, and I find that more these days 100% correct. I am programmed in the thought process of saying I'm positive all the time. And that positivity or my false positivity helps push me through the hardest parts of my day. But it also helps me process the hardest parts of my day and use that as knowledge, use that as as history. The history that I can pull from, not history that I become. So I choose to see those moments of distress, those moments of chaos, and I learn from them because of my enthusiastic nature. And yes, I lean very heavily on my love of cannabis. I don't need it. I want it. I want it so I can assimilate life or assimilate those emotional moments to be able to use them later. I
I always,
want to grow.
I always find that assumption funny that, cannabis is going to make this shit easier on you. It's like, no. If you're being self-honest and you're actually looking at your shit and you're smoking cannabis, welcome to hell. And it's just because you're going to go through so much shit because you're not speeding past it. Right. So, yeah, no, I don't think that's anything to work against your argument by any means. You're like, I love the cannabis. I'm like,
No, I
well,
love it. I'm just saying.
like,
Well, I'm
geez.
just saying I love it, but I love the opportunity it gives me. When I say that, I've gone through the same situation. I'm not going to say exactly that situation, but it was a very gut wrenching, holy shit, life changing family situation that twice has hit me and it's been like, holy shit. And once very mellowed out so I can really take it in. And then once so not mellowed out, so not assisted. And the emotional damage one gave me as opposed to the other. I mean, they both damaged me, but I was able to process one. The other, I did end up processing it, of course, very quickly thereafter. You know,
Did you ever read any Rumi?
I know.
There's a great quote by Rumi that the wound is where the light enters you.
The wound is where the light enters you.
Yes. So what you consider to be damage, I would look at as lessons. I would look at those as opportunities to shed that outer layer of who you think Aaron is.
So that's where I use that to help
damaged.
empower others. I don't want others to have to go through maybe what I've gone through.
I disagree. I disagree entirely. And it's just because you're talking about enthusiasm. Are you enthusiastic about suffering? Because it is informing you. This idea that people aren't changing, for example, is entirely contradictory to everything that you've ever experienced in your life. Like there was a period in your life where you worked for your dad, as you said, right? And if somebody outside of you had looked at you, right, and just saw you doing the same thing in the same way from your comfortable position, right, with the life that you knew and the comfortable routine you had, they would have assumed you weren't changing. But all of a sudden, the rug pulls out from under you, and all of the things that you weren't aware that you learned came right to a head. All of the things that you had been thinking about in the background but weren't acting on because life was convenient and comfortable. You didn't take in until all of a sudden life wasn't comfortable. And then all of those background thoughts, all of those, maybe I should be out on my own. Maybe I shouldn't be working for my dad. Maybe I'm being a little limited here. All of those background thoughts and doubts that you'd been thinking in the wee hours of the night for years, all of a sudden were available to you. So it's not that people aren't changing necessarily, it's that context gives us opportunity. And so a lot of people, they try to stick to the same path. And that's what often, limits them, because they want to hold on to this idea that yesterday is the same as today. They want to hold on to this idea that they are the same person that they have been the whole time. That doesn't stop change, but it does make them fixated on something that makes it look like they're not changing. They're always changing.
So in that, with all that's hit you, you embrace change. Even though I don't, and I saw it where somebody says, "Oh, I've changed." It's a laughable thing. You're right. Because if you're like, "Oh, I've changed, I've become somebody," no, but you've already been that somebody. You didn't see it. You didn't, but then you said it. Context. Look, you are your own hell. You are your own restrictor of life. And so it's context in you being in your own hell. It's amazing what you said right there. I love that. Look, that right there, because I was going to ask, look, how are you embracing change? And in that, you led right into it. So you're embracing it because you understand its context. You understand that you're going to put yourself in your own personal hell. And so when I talk positivity, I try not to say positivity now. Instead, it's enthusiasm for life, because
I have noticed.
you have not necessarily changed my mind. You've helped shape it to understand it and define it a little bit better, because I'm not always positive. I will tell people to go play with traffic, but very happily, very excited, full of glee. I mean, not that I want them to get hit by a car, even though I think that's 5 points.
Bill's
but
scared.
They shouldn't be going to play with traffic anyways. That's just silly. So don't just go play with traffic. That being said, I may not be positive, but I am very enthusiastic of as the sun rises, as the sun sets, as the sun goes down. I'm very enthusiastic for the day and the possibilities that are capable because of the you, that are capable of anything, by not letting life create that your own hell. So positivity, I always tell people, you create your day. You're right. So you said in the beginning, we shouldn't be creating, or we shouldn't be manifesting it necessarily.
Not
because
deliberately.
Then we're wanting to know what's happening next. We're wanting to know what's next. So without manifesting it, without creating it, because that's what you're doing, you create it, you manifest it. Just letting you know. How do we bring about that change, that embracing of our change, that encouragement and hope, that not the immediate change of one, but the immediate seeing of who that person is?
I'm glad you brought up manifestation, because this has been one of my biggest beefs for the longest time. And it's just because I was around when The Secret came out and the law of attraction really started becoming a thing. And it's a wonderful hook. Like, it's a great way to make sales, because you're telling people you can have whatever you want. And obviously what you want is going to make you happy, right? And so I always found it kind of funny, because people assume right now I'm manifesting, now I'm not, right? If I'm thinking about it, now I'm manifesting. And I've always found that really fascinating, because manifestation is not something that you do, it's something that you are. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. It's like, I'm changing. No, you're change. You are the process of change, right? And this is always going to be the point. And there is no disconnect between you and everything else. So the world changes with you. Right? This is not something that you have to go out there and try to do. But when you manifest from moment to moment, when you manifest your day, it helps remember that you're manifesting yourself, that you're manifesting what you embody, which means that if you're trying to manifest a certain outcome, you're embodying lack. And when you're trying to manifest a certain end result that's going to be the ideal according to you, you are judging everything that's happening otherwise. And you are creating a sense of lack and another sense of need, rather than just having faith in what you are and allowing it to unfold. Right, which is what we haven't done this whole time. But this goes back to something that you and I were talking about early. And it's the reason that you started using the word enthusiasm. Ever tell you why I love the word enthusiasm? It's the very same reason I don't believe in the fiction of Ray. Because without the fiction of Ray, I am just an extension of everything. And that is obvious. Without this idea that I am me, this idea of me separate from everything else, there's no division. There's only a conceptual division. There's no actual division. I've been influenced by everything that's ever hit me, every person I've ever talked to, and vice versa. So where's the line between me and them? So if everything is connected and there really is no Ray, then everything is one. And that's usually the idea of God, right? Well, enthusiasm actually comes from the root en and theos, which means to be possessed by God. So when you're being enthusiastic and not being the fiction of you, you are being the awareness of reality. You're being the will of the whole. You're being change embodied. And it's just having faith in that and letting it unfold.
By doing that, by knowing that, are you not creating? Just interjecting that.
I am expression. See, we are always creating, if you want to look at it that way, no matter what we're doing, right? We're always creating the next moment, the next moment, the next moment, the next moment. But it's in understanding that. It's not trying to create something specifically, because that comes from a place of lack. What we're creating now is another trajectory, another path to happiness, rather than the acceptance of where we are. And where we are is where we're trying to get to, that feeling of being free of the fucking path to be more. Isn't that not what we're trying to get to? Is that not the end of the path where we can just be our authentic self? That authentic self has no path.
So the encouragement that you're looking for, the authenticity that you are looking for, does not require anybody. And it doesn't even require you. In that, I mean, from what I'm understanding, it just is.
Yeah,
and you are
as soon as I get out of the way.
What it is.
As soon as I get out of the way, that's it. And this is why all religions and spiritual paths talk about two things: faith and humility. And they're both the same thing. Stop thinking about yourself. Stop trying to be in control. Right? And all of a sudden, everything becomes fucking clear, because you are a part of everything as it happens. And all of your preferences and all of your assumptions and all of that are just for your own benefit. You're doing it and you're creating your own illusionary world over top. This is why it's so nice to sit in the morning and watch the sunset, because what are you not doing? You're not thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about the trajectory. You're not thinking that you have to go anywhere else. And so for that very, very rare little moment, you let go of the path and you experience the end of the fucking path. And then you go back and you start talking about it like it was the path.
So look, it's deep. It takes a lot to assimilate that. It takes a lot but when I say it takes a lot to understand that,
just practice. It's those little changes, right? It's those little changes. It's when you go out into the rest of your day today, and when you see somebody and you think to yourself, I know what they're going through, or I know what this means about me. If you have an interaction or somebody argues with you or something doesn't go the right way, immediately you take it, you put it on yourself. As soon as you do that, you go, I'm fucking looking at the fiction again. Because it makes me feel like I know what's going on and I know who I am and I know what this means. But that's the fucking hole we keep digging. We don't know. We don't know. And when we accept we don't know, we pay attention. And when we pay attention, everything works out, because our intelligence is actually at play.
So
but how
exactly
can we pay attention if we're in fiction?
All right. So I'm glad you said that. You actually led me right. So it's the fictional character that we're creating right there. So it's our acceptance of that fictional character, or our acceptance of releasing that fictional character, but not intentionally doing it. But doing it in the sense of
point. Acceptance of its point, of why we created it. Everybody wants to kill the ego. That's the big thing in spiritual.
Is that enough? I mean, is that enough for us to be able to go to that next level of thinking? Because in that, I said, what life change makes us see how are we embracing it? What life changes? You said it's 20 years of life changes, 30 years of life changes. Me, it's it's been my whole life, but it's been sudden. And but even that doesn't push me to that total point of being able to see beyond myself, of me being able to drop the me.
It's
And
always now. Like that, it's only ever going to happen now. And the whole point is like everybody wants to get to this point where it's like, now I can let myself go. You just held on to that self in trying to let it go, right? The whole point is just be where you are. Just be where you are.
and
Let
that's
go
the
of this.
journey of authenticity. But because I'm on a journey, I am embracing and creating it and manifesting it. Is that because in that I'm also positively setting my life? I'm changing my mindset. I I'm not judging myself anymore.
Well, you're not seeing
I'm not,
yourself as separate from everything as much, right? Like, because
I,
you're not thinking about yourself as
I'm
much.
not. It's not about me. I have to separate myself entirely
Okay,
from the
so
situation to be able
if
to
ever you get a
understand
chance,
the
and I'm going to
situation.
throw the code for this up on the screen. I made a video back in, I think it was 2018, 2017. Funny story behind that. I was doing web design and marketing for somebody, and I ended up getting a licensed subscription for just unlimited stock footage and stock audio. And so I was just like, well, this is kind of fun. I had a green screen and whatnot. And so I decided I was going to make this 5-part series called Discover Transcendence. And it's basically about 3 things that your brain does that if you're not aware that it does that, it just fucks you over. Like you're just going to get lost in it. Like if you don't know your brain's doing these 3 things, it's very difficult to maintain clarity. But one of the things I was talking about in that is the necessity of ego, the necessity of the idea of you. And it's because Jane Levenger, who was a developmental psychologist in the 50s, developed what's called the stages of ego development. You can find this online. I encourage you to go and check it out. And basically, what she's talking about is how the idea of us is formed over time from infancy onward, and that it is a necessary part of us growing up in the world because it's what allows us to feel a certain degree of security and a certain degree of control when we're so young and so small that without that sense of security and control, we would be in constant state of trauma, right? Because when you're young, you can't defend yourself. You can't feed yourself. You don't know how to talk. You don't know how to interact with the world. You have no skills whatsoever. You are definitively fucking helpless. And so the only defense you have is to try and adapt to everybody else. And they're all dealing with an idea of themselves. So you form an idea of yourself, and then you learn from your parents. And your parents teach you a little bit about who to be, right? Because now you fit with them. Now you've integrated with the family unit in a good way because you talk like they do and you act like they do and all that. And then you go to a school where maybe people are a little different, but not too different. And so now you identify with a larger group, forming a new idea of yourself. Maybe you join a religion. Now there's a strict set of rules for who you should be and how you should act, and everybody follows them. And that's very secure and comfortable too. But those are all early stages of ego development. We're talking about ego development into your teenage years when the idea of you is so fucking like intense that everything's the end of the world, right? But as we get older, Lovinger goes on to say it's the disillusion of that attachment to the ego that allows us to connect with more people. Because if you are too connected to your idea of yourself, you judge everybody who doesn't agree with it. You are disconnected from everybody who is too different because you are still identifying with your norms, with your rules, with your language, with your environment. And so it's the questioning of the idea of yourself that allows you to integrate with more and more and more of reality. And that's stage 5 of ego development. And that's where Lovinger says this is where adults are actually adults. But our society lingers in stage 3 and 4. Now, the funniest part about all this is that there's fucking 10 stages. There's 10 stages of ego development. We're just talking about number 5, like it's the fucking epitome. And it's just the beginning. It's just the
I think
beginning.
I've jumped around a few of them. I'll be honest. I don't think I went like from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10. My ego, look, and this for me is probably the most real part of what we're talking about here, because when I talk about life changes, it doesn't, I'm not changing. Big decisions, big changes. Well, they're not big changes. I'm seeing it in a different way that I translate as big. And so, in that though, it's how I develop, and it's how I become, and it's who I become, and it's who I start to see once again. So that's when I say it's a journey. It's It's not so much an intentional journey. It's not so much a created journey. I'm not hiking and stating that that's the actual journey I'm on and the path that I'm taking is the path that I'm on. No, that path creates itself somewhere outside of my control, somewhere outside of my magical mindset. And that's so when, and by the way, that's ego. But that's not just ego, that's me. When you said, I said I jumped from 1 to 10, I went to 10. I was born at 10. Oh my God. When I said that, I had to rebirth my ego. So to drop my ego, to drop myself, to drop that thought process, who am I at that point?
Who you've
When
always been.
ego developed.
See, you're who you've always been. That's the funniest part about this is the whole time you've been you with this idea that you should be something else. And that's the only thing that's blocked you from seeing that you've always been your authentic self is the idea that you're not. Right? And that's what twists our actions. That's what fucks us up is this idea that I have to do anything at all to be my authentic self, rather than the fact that I've always been that authentic self. I've always been the baby I came into the world as. I've always been reality. I just learned to put concepts over top of it, right? And I identified with those concepts. But with the recognition I'm not those concepts immediately starts to detach you from the emotional spectrum that goes with those concepts. Like the entire reason that I reached out to you and said, Oren, we'd love to work with you, man, is because I can recognize the little choices that are happening. You see the big ones because they make massive changes, but the little ones are manifested in every conversation that you have, right? The reason that you're willing to question positivity, for example, is the fact that you looked at it. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't convince you of shit, right? I didn't do anything. I can talk all fucking day. I know. Right? It doesn't mean anybody's going to take it in. You're the one who's like, yeah, okay, maybe that is something I got attached to.
So
but
that's it. So the beginning of transcendence is the context, but the understanding of context and how that context is related, not through a forced manifestation or creation, but just it happens. It just flowed. I'm just saying. No, look, but no, in that you're creating. In that you're manifesting, though, because when we had that first conversation, I'm already a person that's looking to find out who I am, what I am, why I am. What the hell am I fucking doing? Why am I doing it? And in that crazy search, I have learned to love who I am. I don't fear judgment because there is no judgment. I'm the only person judging. Nobody else is judging. And if you judge me, I don't give a shit because I don't know. I have no clue that you're judging me. And I have no care. So I make my decisions and live my life very differently because it's not, I'm not in the fear of being judged. I want others to find the love that I've found for myself. I had to love me. I went through a crash in relationship and I had to realize it wasn't about the relationship. It was about the individual. And I forgot who that person was. I was eating from the same plate for so long. I was drinking from the same glass. I was thinking from the same well. And so that change for me was a slow deterioration of self. But in that, it helped me let go of the ego. Because the ego was attached to that fictional character that we're creating.
Sure. What I mean by beware is that one of the habits or one of the things that our brain does is it tries to create habits immediately. Like our brain is hardwired to create habits because it's trying to save energy and keep us alive. And so when we do something that's worked or we perceive to have worked for a very long time, the brain just keeps doing it, whether we recognize it or not, without attention. And so what I mean is that as much as having the rug pulled out from under you can threaten and even shake the ego that you were holding on to, that urge to go back to another conceptual self will continue to pop up. It's all that you and I have ever learned. Think about yourself. And the thing that you're thinking about is you. And as soon as we wipe out one, we want to build another. And all we're doing, again, is watching the slow degradation of that freedom over time. All of a sudden, we're back in the familiar. It's a different familiar, right? But the longer we're in it, the more it has the same fucking impact. And so this is why people often end up in what's called a spiritual ego, right? They abandon the ego that they were attached to, and then all of a sudden they find a new one that feels so much more empowering, so much better, but dooms them just as much.
How does that affect you in how you deal with life now? Deal with corporate life, business life, transactions at the gas station? And I say that because that's a very poignant question. I could not deal with some of the same corporate structure that I once had, because then am I letting go of ego, or am I temporarily holding on to this ego? And then outside of that structure, immediately letting go, unzipping out of that shell, and jumping back into my temporal transcendent state. And then at 9 o'clock in the morning, or 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, actually, 5:30, because I'm traffic. 5, just say 5, 4:45, and I'm up. It's ridiculous. I don't think I sleep anymore. Whatever. And then you put that shell back on, and you get back into your car that's shaped like a box, and you drive in a box, and you go to work and work in a box. Or even if you're outside of that box, you're still buzzing within circuitry of that box. Then you get home and you take off that shell once again. So how being transcendent as you are all the time, how does that affect your, I guess, interaction? Not interaction. You know what I mean?
I do.
You know the word I'm looking for that I can't find, which is great, because that's a good.
I'll leave the transcendent comment alone for now, and we'll just get to the question. So you remember a period in your life where you were really focused on the idea of yourself. There was a certain way that you had to dress, a certain way that you had to talk. There was a certain way that you had to be perceived by others. There was an insecurity there. There was a fragility there. And there was a desire for a certain set of rules or an environment that made it fucking crystal clear what was the right way and what was the wrong way, so you could just do it and not have to worry about yourself anymore. And it's because there was this fear of being yourself. It's because of being not valuable, being judged by others, because you didn't have that sense of yourself to begin with. And so there was this level of again, fragility. So I lived in that place for a very long time. And it's the very place that I've recognized that I entrapped myself in, but it's a societal thing as well. Okay, so that's just the point one. So when I'm talking to other people, I recognize they're fucking there. Like when somebody's judging me, they don't even see me. They're judging themselves. Any judgment they have is based on how they're looking at themselves. And the more they're judging, the more they're focused on themselves, not me. It has nothing to do with me, right? And it has everything to do with them looking for that sense of certainty, for that sense of control, for that sense of who they are, for that sense of, once again, rigidity and fragility. So have you ever been in a play?
In a plant?
A play, like acting. Have you ever
a play? I thought for
theater?
a moment. I mean, I'm like, I'm not that high. He's like, have I ever been in a plant? I'm like, I don't know. I've dug myself into the dirt before.
Have you ever done any acting in theater?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I've done quite a lot. I mean, everywhere from extras, but some of my fun stuff was some of the, like Dark of the Moon, and these are all plays. Okay.
The point is that when you go into a performance with other people, there is an agreement as to the part everybody's going to play. And if you were to suddenly go in there and not play that part, everybody would be put off. Everybody would be like, what the fuck is happening, right? Same is true for corporate life or any job whatsoever. And so you worded it as a shell, but that implies that you need protection. I look at it as a way to keep them from breaking down. I'm doing this for their sake. I'm making it so that they don't feel fucking threatened by the fact that I don't give a fuck about their rules or need for security. So I will play the part as agreed to by everybody who's in that environment, right? Maybe push the edges a little bit, but with the understanding that everybody there is just as fragile as I was, right? And it's really important to recognize that.
But it is, and it's so important that you just said that. I wanted to be an actor my whole life. I mean, younger life up to 30s, I suppose, maybe late 20s. Early 30s, whatever. And I tried in so many different ways, but it wasn't because I wanted to be somebody else. I didn't know who I was. I I saw beautiful wonders of the world and I didn't understand anything. And I didn't soak any of it in. And it's like, was I even there? What happened to me? Was I this different person? Why couldn't have I been enlightened, or at least more enlightened, and then see these things? Oh my God. But why then? But there was a reason. And there was a growth and a becoming and a.
Question for you. How common do you think that experience is? And I really want you to ask yourself this, okay? Given everything I've said about the societal mentality and how we're raised in school, about how to judge ourselves and think about ourselves and fucking, live in this fictional world and all that, how many other people do you think go through exactly what you just discussed? That they go through a lifetime of stuff that they were never really paying attention to the degree that they are now. And then they look back and they're like, fuck, I feel like I missed all that. Would you be able to empathize with those people otherwise? Would you be able to go and get through that yourself so you could remind them that it doesn't diminish their life now at all if you hadn't gone through it yourself? There are paths that I cannot walk because my life did not afford me those opportunities. And so there are paths that I can't empathize with. You can, because you walk those paths. Everybody has a different lesson to learn and different people to empathize with based on the story that we go through. It's not that it had no purpose. It's not that it didn't work out the way it was supposed to. And it's not that you didn't take anything in. You did the best you could with what you knew. And that's always changing.
Well, look, like now, and even living in the now and understanding the now, like for myself. Life is a 360, 380, 180. Holy shit, 80s from where it was even 2 years ago, 6 years ago. Oh wow. I mean, and anything in a positive direction, temporary positive directions. And then because I wasn't being my true authentic self, and I wasn't leading, I mean, I was leading a good life but not authentic. I was leading something that I was trying to help others without helping myself, without seeing myself, and understanding that I need to continue that journey without creating that journey, but doing things within that path better for me.
Beware the urge to look back and judge yourself for your lack of authenticity back then, because this is why I was saying, like, the stages of ego development, it's not just an individual thing, it's a collective thing. It really is. Like, you were raised in an environment that lingers at a certain level of judgmentalism. You were raised in an environment that has educated you to think about that egoic self. We were raised this way, man. We have been judged and graded since grade fucking 1. We have been compared to our idea of everybody else. We've been put on a spectrum of success or failure since we fucking started. So no wonder it takes us 20, 30, 40, 50 fucking years to come to terms with it. We're surrounded by it all the time. It's not like all of a sudden the insight you're having is common. It like you're an outlier right now because everybody's fucking catching up.
So how do we cope with that? And I say that, look, I'm not a fucking empath. I don't know what the fuck I am. I'm fucking nothing. I'm everything and nothing at the same time. And in my change of who I am, I'm still wanting. Look, I've been in an industry, and I was in an industry for a while where I had made it clear in my head that I'm doing this to help. I'm doing this but I was getting a paycheck, and I get to help, and I get to reach new heights in a budding industry medically that can reach so many because my silliness reaches people. Then they hear the medical facts behind it. My playful nature gets attention to something that doesn't always feel so playful. So I dedicated myself and created my ego as that. And then when the crashing of all of that came and ended, why was I still helping? Why am I still doing events? There was no bounce back to me. I'm not selling a product. I wasn't doing anything because I care. Well, fuck caring. That's a lot of work. I need a paycheck. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. But is that ego? No, that's need. That's need of survival. But then I had to reestablish who I was. The ego of who I was was still lingering, and I'm still doing events. I'm still doing this. I'm still doing that. I'm doing something in like 2 weeks, a big party that we're going to be talking about here, which is actually really wild. So I'm hosting an event. There's speakers. There's religious people. There's non-religious people. There's oh yeah, no. It's going to be electric, and I'm very excited. But in that, that's partial ego. But is it? It's not, because I'm not doing it I am doing it for a community, but it's not ego for that community because I don't give a shit what that community thinks about me. So, is that letting go? Is that being more?
Well, are you doing it for them or are you doing it for you?
The combination of things, I guess, in combination, because I say it's 50-50. I'm giving of myself to this community to be like, hey, let's bring new light.
But why? Education. But why? Outside of, because we already established it's not for the profit. So I mean, if you were just left to your own devices, you would start doing stuff like this. Well, why do you think that is? Other than that, it's an expression of who you are. It's an expression of who you are. You're a part of all this, man. When you get out of your own way, it's just kind of a natural impulse to get involved. Because you're not doing it for any reason other than the fact that you can, and because you can.
That's the thing. You don't understand it sometimes. It just happens.
Well, why would you understand it except to make it part of your ego?
So is that still letting go of ego? I mean, am I still
just do it because
obviously I haven't let go of my ego because ego is still there. I'm still dealing with.
You're always going to think of yourself. You're always going to have the potential to think of yourself. The only thing you can really do is let go of the attachment that the thing that you're thinking about is actually you.
Oh, that was deep. No. Listen. Talk more on that. That was deep. That right there, the you that you're thinking of is you. So not that temporal shift that you have to go into for work and that work you or that relationship you. Because look, that's big. You said you got out of a huge relationship. You had to realize who you were, I imagine, outside of that relationship. How did you cope with that?
That's the recognition. I was
that
never
part of the transcendence of
myself as. Like I've never been the person I've saw myself as. And so here's the question, like, your idea of air is not the air that you breathe, right?
It's a perception.
It's a concept.
Everything that we touch and we see is not actually as it is.
So why would you assume that your description of yourself is any more real?
Okay. So being more in touch with that, you're able to easily let go of that, realizing that you don't have to be a part of it. Do you know how much that would have helped me in relationships when I was a teenager or shit in high school? Or I don't have to be a part of it.
No.
I'm letting go. And wait. Just letting it happen. Fuck you. So no, I mean, and I say
just be
that
you, man.
That's almost a feeling. But in life, we still have to deal with things. So I wish it was, look, I wish it was as easy as saying letting go.
It's not easy, but it is simple.
It's simple.
Simple, not easy, right? And it's like, how do we deal with life now? Just with that in mind. Like when somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, we're selling the house that you live in and you have to move in 2 months. This is something that recently happened to me after the end of my relationship. So I'm left with my daughter and all of a sudden the owner of the house that we're renting says, we're selling it to somebody else. You got 2 months to move. By the way, it's right at Christmas. Best of luck. Right. Well, all of a sudden, all of the thoughts in my head are just clamoring. Why me? I don't deserve this. Fucking assholes. Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And immediately I'm like, right, but none of that's true. But none of that's true. That's all just me wanting to think about myself and comparing myself to them and making assumptions about them and their intentions and doing that whole thing so I can just feel like I know what the fuck is happening instead of just going, well, I guess I'm moving. And then just doing that. And then just doing that. And that's all it is so much of what we go through day to day. And if you watch for it, you'll notice it's based on the idea of you, that this means something about you, that this person is deliberately making it personal. It's about you instead of being about them. So much of our hell is this idea that it means something about this fiction. And so it's just going through it one moment at a time. There is no magic understanding that's going to take you from black to white. You are not going to go from taking yourself seriously to not taking yourself seriously if you just understand one concept at all. But you can do it one lesson at a time, one moment at a time. So this is why it's important to get out of your comfort zone, because if you do the same thing day in and day out, sure, you're going to have some triggers. You're going to see moments where you're taking yourself seriously. I'm going to let that go. Sure. Okay. I'm good. I'm good. And you're starting to feel like you're enlightened. You're taking yourself too seriously. All of a sudden the fucking floor drops out from under you. Everything's new. And all of your triggers come back up. Why? Because you never actually got to deal with them. You were still in the same environment. The uncertainty wasn't there. That's the point. And this is why context. Right? But it's the moment to moment stuff. If you watch, and you have to watch, your hell comes from making it about you. Your hell comes from taking it personally rather than just letting it be what it is without your preference or judgment. And it's just doing that.
Taking it personally. So when you say taking it personally, because if you're letting it go, you're not taking it so personally. But taking it personally. So the letting go, and you're right. So you said, look, it's not just a few things we're letting go of. It's everything we're letting go of. To let go of everything is a lifestyle. To let go of everything is because sometimes it doesn't afford for things. And that's a big beat. Wow. See, the door's open. It just right here. And I let go right there. I let go of myself. I may have peed just a little bit. No, I'm joking. I let go. I let go of myself in that situation, and it's all right. He'll get comfortable somewhere in here. That'll be fine. He'll just live here. It's fine. They're fine. They're fine. They're honey. They're good people.
It's good timing. So, just be.
And so in life, now do you just let go of everything? Everything? Or do you have moments where you're dealing with things that they're unletable? I don't know where I was going with that, but we're going to let that happen. It was there. It's out. It's out there now, so there's no taking it back. Right. Please. Are there things that are non-line crossable?
Well, again, like it just comes down to the acceptance that anything that I'm going through is still just it's just part of my brain processing. Like we tend to look at everything our brain does as being indicative of shit that we're going through, thinking that somehow if we dealt with everything, our brain would stop thinking, right? But your heart beats and your brain thinks. It's what it's meant to fucking do. The problem isn't the thinking. The problem is how seriously you take every single thought, right? You're like, oh, that on its own means something, rather than that within the context of the thought that's 30 thoughts down the fucking road makes more sense, right? We just panic because we assume everything means something about us right now instead of just letting it process, right? And so there's a great book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. It came out in the 70s, I think. It was written by an ex-footballer. And there's a quote in there that I love, and I quote it all the time. If you find yourself being resistant, don't resist your resistance. So if you find yourself thinking about yourself going through the shit, just let it fucking happen. Stop thinking it means something about you, right? Like, don't take it personally. It's just your brain processing stuff, right? Like right now, that bee that's flying around you, it doesn't actually have a beef with you. It's just doing what bees do, just like your brain does, right? It doesn't have a beef with you. You just take it personally.
You're right. I feel like I'm a hostage right now. I'm just going to state this. He's behind me. I can hear. You're hearing. I had the microphone off. If I had it on just a second ago, you'd be like, "Holy shit, he's close! He's close, and he's huge. He's not like a regular bee. He's a big bee. He's an extra big bee. I know there's like extra different sized bees here in Florida. I don't know what the fuck happened to them. Like some nuclear. And then at the door, it's like he's got friends. It's a fucking hornet. And he's guarding the door, and he's like, keep walking, people. Shut the hell up. Just go. We're doing something in here. They're doing something in here. They're scouting shit. Okay. I don't even know what I was talking about. I went down a path with the bee.
That is okay. If I could though, before we wrap up, I just want to say that there's something that I say a lot to everyone, and it's going to take on a lot of different meanings as you go along, but and I mean this sincerely, just keep it light. It's so very easy to look at what's going on in our head and actually start making it heavy because we're paying attention to it and we take it personally, right? We look at it for what it is, and it's always something that we're afraid of that really makes it feel heavy, right? As soon as it's a thought that we don't want to look at, that's when the shit gets fucking weird, right?
But
So as
just let
soon
go.
as you're just let it go, just look at it and go, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. And it's informing me. It's informing me. This is why when people are like, oh, I have a lot of intrusive thoughts, the only reason they're intrusive is because you don't want to see them. That is the only reason they're intrusive, but they're informing you, right? They're teaching you things. And it's just the judgment of them that makes them seem useless.
Next time. I should have closed the door. Because there's other things that just recently flowed in. And it's like he's signaling people. He's like, listen, you got to come in.
You're manifesting.
I mean, so that being said, so by the way, everybody, I want to say thank you for joining us today on High and Empowered, because this is empowering to hear really Ray's mindset. This has been, I want to say you've really focused in on some key elements of just kind of letting go. I mean, all of it came back to letting go, going through all of these milestones. And within those milestones, it was learning how to let go. But not just letting go, leaving go. I mean, having to deal with what you go or let go, but still letting it be. Now, has that fared well for you?
I'll be honest with you right now. Like, regardless of all the changes that I've talked about in my life, regardless of all the uncertainty and so on and so forth, and this is what I meant earlier. Like, my life is so entirely different. I woke up for years every morning wishing that I hadn't woke up. I used to walk to work every day thinking about ways to kill myself. I used to live in a constant state of hell and self-loathing. There was nothing for me, and there never would be, because I was attached to that story. And now I wake up every day refreshed, excited, enthusiastic. And that has nothing to do with things going right in that day. I could be getting fucking evicted, as I've said. And I still wake up with the same thing because I know the weight is mine. The weight is mine. I'm just dealing with shit. That's all it is. But as soon as I think it's about me, it becomes something else entirely. And so I live in this state where I feel connected to people. I feel empathetic. I feel creative. I feel, like unlimited energy all the time. Like you said, I don't sleep a whole lot either if I don't want to, because I've got a fucking shit ton of creativity and energy all the time, right? And it's just because there's so much room left now that I've abandoned the fiction of me taking up all that room, right? And so I live very much in a state of perpetual heaven on earth. And it's just because of the lack of resistance to what I'm going through. And that's just where I am now. And every day, every week, every year, it shifts so much more. If you were to go back and look at episode 1 of the podcast, you would see a different me. And it's not that I was saying anything differently, but it's where it's coming from. There's so much more in terms of relaxation. There's so much more in terms of fluidity.
You become unattached to what you've attached to. If you unhinge, what rehinges you? And what unattaches you? I mean, it's like, what unattaches you, baby? No, it's like, really, what crawls under your skin and unattaches you from that path to enlightenment, that path to transcendence? Sir, talk to me here.
I really don't like Brussels sprouts. Admittedly, Brussels sprouts, because it really is like, but this is why it's worthwhile to remember that it's not about getting rid of your ego. It's about having a fun relationship with your ego. Like I say, I don't like Brussels sprouts. I'll eat Brussels sprouts. I don't really give a shit, right? But it's a fun thing to kind of hold on to me, because why the fuck not, right? In the same way that that I'm not a huge fan of snake oil salesmen. Like I still have admittedly some irritation at people who will sell you a path to happiness just so they can benefit themselves. That shit pisses me off, right? And
never be able to sell somebody something that they should be able to seek, they shouldn't ever pay for. It should become as part of you. But that
still irks me. But I'm letting it go. And what I mean by that is in the same way that that the reason they irk me is because I insist on seeing it as superfluous, as something that's needless. Right. But I'll tell you right now, the majority of people who ever came into me for life coaching were people who had spent tens of thousands of dollars on those assholes and finally gotten to a point where they were disillusioned enough to come back to reality. So is it that those snake oil salesmen have no purpose? Right. Or is it just that I don't like it?
Or do we require it on that path of understanding things? Because
We're
now
in this
on my
together,
path
right?
of life, I would never buy anything from one. I mean, I see the want, and it's like, oh yes, but then I'm like, wait, do I want? It says I want it, but is that something I need? And in that need of wanting it as a need, and no, it's too much work. I'm not even going to go down that path. You have a great day. Bye. And he's like, but why didn't you get it? Because it's too much. Too much. Money? No. Effort. They're like, but it's making your life easy. Not now. Now I've thought about it too much. I'm going to think about it. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to waste my money. Or whatever. Now, see, look what I've done. So that's, instead of going down that path of thinking, I just say, forget it. I'm done.
But going back to your question, I'll be a bit more serious this time. Yeah, I mean, so right now I'm at a point where I have, quote unquote friends. I have people in my life who care about me and have a perception of me that had nothing to do with me trying to orchestrate that perception. It has nothing to do with me trying to get them to like me. It has nothing to do with me being anything. And so all of the stuff that came from my younger life comes to the surface. And it's so funny because it's almost easier for me to deal with negative judgments than deal with somebody telling me that I have value. Right. And it's just because those triggers are fucking way back. Right. And so when somebody says like, you're a really good person, or thank you so much for being in my life, my brain goes, oh, whatever. Like it just slides right off. Right. And it's because I start going back into the idea of me that is so old. And so all relationships for me are a chance to get caught back up in this idea of myself. All relationships, all moments, and the closer the moment, the more intimate the relationship, the more vulnerable the interaction, the more so that's the case, right? But it's being willing to go through it. That said, I think Oren's getting a dive bombing here, and we should probably wrap up this episode so he can survive.
No, that is a great way to bring an episode to a close. The beat and the future and the future endeavors that I will be having with this beat, that has decided to come much closer. So much so that I pointed at him a moment ago. But that's the thing. That's the path that you've taken. So these things, and I just want to mention it. Brussels sprouts are lovely, and they can be lovely. It's the context of which you put these Brussels sprouts in. I mean, don't put baby in a corner. Don't put baby in a corner. Look, Brussels sprouts. It's like what's whispering. You need to attach yourself onto them, and don't make them your own hell. Change the context of where you put them, and not just Brussels sprouts. In that change of who you are and what pulls you out, is it almost an immediate, I'm good, I'm back? I mean, it pulls me out just a little bit. It's like, I need to count to 10. No, I'm not going to count to 10. I'm transcendent. Fuck 10.
It'll take as long as it fucking takes. But to be honest with you, yeah, it goes pretty quick now. The end of my relationship, it took me, and I can tell you right now, it took me an afternoon. It took me an afternoon to just go through everything I thought it meant about me and my life and all of that. And it was everything in the emotional spectrum. I'm like, it took me an afternoon. That afternoon was fucking hell. Like it was absolute fucking hell. But it was the non-resistance to it. Like I remember at one point it felt so fucking heavy. It felt so fucking dark, man, that I just laid down on the floor. And as I'm laying on the floor, watching all these thoughts around me and just going through me, it dawned on me that all of them had an underlying fucking tone. They all had the same underlying message. I'm fucked. And I'm like, that seems too convenient. Like that seems a little bit too fucking unanimous to be serious, right? And so just like, fuck that shit. And that was it. That was it. It was just I don't know. I don't know what this means. I don't know what's best for everybody. I don't know what I should be. All I know is that my life is changing according to what I've become, according to what I am. Because as you said, we're manifesting. Not that we're manifesting life. We are a manifestation of life. It's one and the same. They're connected. The observer and the observed are one and the same.
A great way to, Great way to end this then. So do you feel it's pre-written? I mean, that we are yet actors on a pre-written stage through the multiverse. Maybe not within that realm of thinking, but whatever.
Is a great question. Here's the best answer I can give you in the short period of time that we have. Imagine that every script that could be written of your story has been, and at every moment you get to choose which one you follow.
Within your own dimension.
According to what mindset you're in.
Whatever. I don't even know what you are. People, this is it. This is high and empowered. Every day is your day. Let it attach yourself to the day that you want to create without creating it, but attaching yourself in that direction. I'm loving it. Empower yourself. You, listen, you are the important one, but the you that's attached to you and all of you and all the different yous that are there in those worlds that must exist sometimes. Well, I empower all of them and you empower yourself, empower all of them. It's a chain reaction. It's wildly energetic. So if you feel like a pulse somewhere, it was meant to happen. Attach yourself to where you want it to go. Next Wednesday, I just wanted to mention, next Wednesday, we're going to have Dr. THC of Boca Raton. Is going to be fantastic. This was fantastic. Every conversation, every moment, whatever it is in the now will never be lived again like it is right now. We have it. This is it. I'm even with the bee and the moment with the bee and this experience with the bee and I think that bee feels slightly empowered. And awesome. See this, it's an energetic flow. Yes. That's what I love. That's the point of all of this. Be empowered. Be powerful. Know your power. Know your journey without creating it. But learning attachment. I have attachment issues. So we'll talk about that at another time. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you
man. And I mean that. Oren,
thank you. You know,
I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. And I appreciate you being the host of High and Empowered. I mean, this is something that we've definitely been looking forward to, is just how much you're settling into it. And you are. Like, you can tell that you're settling into the podcast gig. You're really having a good time, you know, and you're making it your own. So I appreciate being able to be here on the show with you. And I look forward to having you on Dualistic Unity in the very near future.
And I'm unconsciously looking at you in appreciation, heavy appreciation of these words. And thank you, everybody. Thank you. Wait. Okay. What's up? Okay. Bye. Beautiful day, beautiful month, beautiful year, beautiful everything. Attach yourself to it. Bye.